Guys, first of all, I can't thank all of you guys enough. I know with Justin and I, we've been involved here over the last week or so, with this hashtag WR Tools, and what Justin's doing down there in North Carolina has been phenomenal. Justin's asked me to come on here today, really in regards to not so much the X's and O's, but really just, building that player, building that man, how to dig into kids' lives, how to create a bunch of unity amongst your team. And really from that aspect, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Obviously I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, played football my whole entire life. Ended up going to Ohio State. I left Ohio State after I walked on, went to Northern Iowa, so played a little bit at Northern Iowa. And then after playing at Northern Iowa, I ended up going to Indianapolis Colts. I was cut from the Colts, ended up in the XFL, played in the very first XFL back in the early 2000s. And then ended up playing 2 years of arena after that before Kurt Warner took me to St. Louis, and I ended up signing with the St. Louis Rams and played 8 years in the NFL. After I retired from playing in the NFL in 2010, I got into coaching. I became the head football coach at Kentucky Christian University, and then which about 30 minutes down the road from Marshall University. We flipped that program around. Had a heck of a staff and a bunch of great players at Kentucky Christian. We flipped that program around and was offered the wide receiver coaching job at Marshall. My job at Marshall was to recruit South Carolina. So long story short, 2 years later, a small school in South Carolina called Limestone College called about, an opportunity to become the head football coach there at Limestone College in South Carolina. And then a roommate of mine back in arena football back in the early 2000s, a roommate by the name of Matt Nagy, gave me a call. He had just taken the head job of the Chicago Bears, and so now I'm wide receiver coach of the Chicago Bears. But I've been very blessed, obviously, with the journey that I've been on and the path that I've been on. But I think just from a humble standpoint, the biggest thing and the best thing about my journey and your journey, as we all look back, is all the people that have been involved with our journey, rather it's players, assistant coaches, administration. And so the one thing that I wanted to make sure, especially about 3 or 4 years left to go in my career as a player, the one thing that I knew that I wanted to do was coach. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to start coaching was because I wanted to do it the right way. You know, when you grow up so much around the game of football, as we all have from high school all the way through college, and then some of us at the professional level, you start learning what not to do as a coach more than you do what to do as a coach. And so I really was passionate, very, very passionate about I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be able to influence young men. I wanted to be able to allow young men to chase their dreams. And I wanted to be part of that growth of those young men in chasing those dreams. And so I really started taking the last 3 or 4 years of my career and taking the summer times and starting to work with those young men in high school level or at the college level. And I really enjoyed teaching them as much as I could about how to play the game or about the game, and then going back and watching them throughout the fall while I was playing, going back and watching them throughout the fall, watching their success, watching how their teams were doing, having that communication with them week in and week out. And so I really grew a great passion for that. And towards the end of my career as a player, I became way more passionate about my success, my individual success. And I really started becoming way more passionate about the success of the guys that I had been training with, or guys that I had been around as a mentor. And so obviously I knew at that point in time, I wanted to be a football coach. And so to this day, that hasn't changed. I know we've had some videos out here the last couple of days on social media and Twitter, talking about the stance and start and talking a little bit about some releases. But I think a lot of people have really dug into the fact that it's about your passion and your love for these players and how you can allow these players to be successful. So that's kind of who I am in a nutshell. I did want to have this forum with Justin and to be able to open up a forum here for a lot of questions. I know all you guys have all different areas and all different things that you guys are working on. We all are working on the same goal, I believe, in regards to, obviously, we want our team to be successful. I believe the number one way for your team to be successful is have a bunch of unselfish individuals fighting and working as hard as they can for a team goal. And I tell my guys all the time that you have to be selfish. I know this is crazy, but you have to be selfish in order for your team. You have to be selfish to be able to come unselfish for your team. And so what I mean by that is our guys have to do everything, the little things, making sure they're in the best shape they have ever been in their life, working harder than they've ever done before they show up to training camp. They have to become so selfish and so center active in regards to everything that they need to do personally, so that when they show up to our training camp, or they show up to practice, or they show up to your training camp, or whatever it is, that they need to be the best that they can possibly be and ready to go attack to become successful for our team. And so those are some things that are really important to me. It's some things that we stress. But, Justin, I can't thank you enough for allowing me to be on this, and we'll open this thing up for some questions. Don't hold anything back. I don't have all the answers. That's why we kind of got on this forum here a couple weeks ago in regards to everything's right, wrong, or indifferent. We all have our own opinions. We all have our experiences. My life growing up is different than a lot of your lives, and or vice versa. And so we're all learning what's right and how we coach and the personalities and characteristics that we have. But I do believe this before we start is I really do believe that, I don't think that you become a coach by accident. I think you're called to be a coach. I think it's not something that you learn. I think it's something that you have a knack for. And so I really believe that we all can get better at our knack, that we all can be better at what we do. But it really is all about the kids. It really is all about the kids' success. It's about their life. It's about them growing up. I tell our kids, I used to use this all the time when we were recruiting with the family, with families, when they would come for recruiting weekends, that listen, my goal is not to make your son a better football player. Your son will become a better football player as I turn him into becoming a better husband and a better father someday. And so I believe that when you teach those kids with that mindset and that aspect, you're not just going to teach them the X and O's, and you're not just going to teach them all these drills that you run around and do, and it makes them all look good and all that stuff. Like, that doesn't determine the kind of person that they are. I believe what's inside of them really determines them, and what's inside is life. And the more you can teach them about those life skills, I think the better football player you get. So, Justin, it's in your hands, buddy.
I'll start this off, and a couple questions are coming in. But when you've taken over a program, what was the number one thing, or what was the most important thing to you to get accomplished first when you got there?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, and all of us would agree, is there's got to be two things really. There's got to be a lot of trust, or you have to build trust. And I think once you start building trust, you start earning respect. I'll never forget this. The first question that I ever was asked when I took a head job, really my first ever coaching job, the first question that I ever had was, what do you want your program to become? What's your goals? And my first answer, never thought about it, but the first answer that I came up with was, we want to be respected. When you play against us, you're gonna respect us. When we walk off that field, we might not be good right now, but you're gonna know we're getting a lot better, and there's gonna be a respect to what we do and how we do it. And so I think the biggest thing that you have to establish is, first, before your team can become respected, there has to be a relationship between the player and the coach that's trust and respect. Now, how does that happen? That doesn't happen by going to kiss up to that kid every single day and babysitting him to become a great player. I just don't think that happens. I think there's got to be an honest communication between every single player of who you are, what your expectations are for your program, and how that program is going to become great because of the expectations that you have for that individual. And you got to be honest with that individual of the strengths that he has and some of the weaknesses that he has, and how you're going to continue to build and mold all those things. And then I think you also have to make sure that every single individual that you talk to, and it literally has to be every single person, especially as the head coach, but every one of those guys has to understand their role. And I think that's really big. And I think that when you have all those communications, it's easy to say trust and respect, but the hard part is trying to get that and to earn that. And I think the biggest way is being able to communicate with those players about what your role is, what you expect out of them, what their weaknesses are, what their strengths are, right, wrong, or indifferent. Kind of have that open communication, starting to build that relationship, that you're there for the player, and that you want to help that player in every aspect. And you move on, and you start building those kids, and those kids start seeing on a daily basis how much you care about them, when you're checking in on them, when you're calling them, when you're doing the little things for them, when you're spending time with them, when you're communicating with them, when you're talking about their family, when you're talking about everything, that you've learned from their past. They're starting to understand and starting to believe in you that, man, this guy really cares. And so this is something that I thought was really, really important, and it has stuck with me since the beginning.
I think this one kind of piggybacks off this, but the coach just wrote it and said he's a first-year D3 coach, and he was asking what are some of the things or some of the keys to be a successful coach.
Well, I think the first thing is this. When you get to the NFL, or even when you get to a Division I college, you don't ever have to paint the fields. You don't have to do the laundry. You don't have to, babysit in the study halls. There's a lot of things that you don't have to do. That when you're a Division III or an NAIA or a Division II coach, you have a lot of responsibility. And I would say take it all in. Those traits and those things that you're going to have to go through as a coach. Don't be disappointed when you're doing laundry or that you're doing the extra little things. I think those things were so valuable to me when I had a chance to do that, building a small program or a smaller school, coming from the NFL where you had everything really taken care of for you, and then going out and having to do all those things. It was invaluable. And so I would tell you first and foremost that everything that you have to do it, and do it with everything you have, because there's going to be a time down the road where you're not going to have to do those things anymore, because there's going to be people hired to do it. And you're going to be so grateful to be in that position. And so it's all those little things that you learn from doing that when you're a smaller coach, I think that will allow you to be successful. The other thing is, I think, don't think that you're any different than any other place. It doesn't matter if you're at a small school in high school, a D3 school in college, or a Division I school or an NFL school. You still have players to impact. And so they're all the same in regards to that. It's just a different number. And so the value that you can add in these kids' life is going to be the same value that you can add in a kid's life if you were at a bigger level. And so make sure you understand that. Don't ever downgrade for what you're doing or where you're at, but just take everything and make sure that you surround yourself with people that are like-minded also. Guys that love to coach, guys that aren't sitting there complaining about not being at D1, or guys that aren't sitting there complaining about doing the laundry or doing all these small things. Trust me, I've been there and I've seen it. And you got to make sure that you have guys that love coaching football. They don't care what's going on. I know we had a lot of coaches where they're making $4,000 or $5,000 a day, and they're getting 3 meals a day in the cafeteria. Like, they loved it. Like, they thought that was great for them. And so surround yourself with those guys. And then the one thing that I will tell you is, and then help those guys become great coaches and help those guys blossom and move on. And so, a lot of coaches get so tied up into surrounding themselves with guys that they're so scared of them expanding. Like I think that's the greatest thing about what you get to do as a head coach, and making sure that you get your coaches trust you, and that they love doing what they do for you, but they also trust you enough to know that you're going to expand their horizon in regards to coaching. And so I just think there's a lot of things that it's an invaluable opportunity to coach Division III football.
What was the biggest obstacle or challenge you faced when becoming a head coach?
Well, I think everybody would all say the same thing is I don't think your program can actually maximize its potential if you don't have a lot of key parts around the university involved and excited about your program. I think the biggest thing that you have to do that's not always there is, and I really love this when I was doing NAIA ball, because you really had this relationship because it was a smaller school, but being able to communicate and have a good relationship with every teacher, the professors, the administration, the athletic director, everybody at the cafeteria, all those things are so important to have a relationship with. And it's a key thing to making sure that when you do that, did I lose you? It's just important to be able to start off in the beginning and starting to build all those relationships, academics, admissions, understanding that you're there not just to get players in and that you're expecting them to do things for your program, but actually kind of start making them fans of your program, people that want to come to your football games, people that will help you when you're in need. They know that you're doing what's best for the student athlete. They know that your heart is trying to help kids succeed in life. And so when you start building those relationships with all those people, instead of going to football games and then listening to people talk about you and all that kind of stuff, which tears your program down, I think the first and foremost thing is making sure that you have people around you that's around that school that is all in for your football program. And it's not about building players and winning. It's more about building the student athlete and building men. And once they know that, it's going to make it a lot easier in a process in the transition of, like I said, going to admission office and trying to get kids into school, financial aid, trying to work better to help kids get, more money or whatnot to get into school. Professors trying to figure out what's a better way for kids to study, because it is important to. I mean, listen, when you're a coach, and I know it's easier at smaller school than it is Division I, but when a kid's not doing what he's supposed to do in class, it's not like you just called a professor. Listen, grab a kid and go sit in the professor's office. Let that professor know that you're on this thing, that it's this is important to you, not because you're trying to get him to play football, but you're trying to get him to graduate. You're trying to better his life. And so building those relationships around the outside of your football team, I think is first and foremost important, because now I think those guys internally are starting to see, hey, listen, this guy went to the academic office with me, or this guy went to financial aid with me. Like, this guy really is really helping me to try to become a good student and a good player. And so I just think those are important.
Sorry, I muted myself. Couple position-specific questions. What's the biggest mistake you see high school wide receivers make?
Man, what a great question. You just talking about the player itself?
I guess he is, maybe from a technical standpoint too.
I would say from a mental and a technical standpoint, I think the mental part is, I think these kids tell themselves too much how good they are. I really do. I think every single one of those kids have been told so much how they're going to be in the NFL someday, or how how they should be playing and starting, rather than just learning how to work. Becoming a tough player, doing all the right things. And so I think that's a big thing. That's anything, I guess, in college and everybody. I think these kids think they're way better than who they are. And I think that's a tough deal to overcome. I think when you talk from a technique standpoint, I think that talent kind of hurts these kids a little bit in regards to their talent being better than other players. And I think you'll see a lot of kids that don't become successful because they don't understand how to keep evolving their talent, if that makes sense. I think these kids get so stuck in this, oh, I can do that. Or, yeah, I can do that. This kid we're about to play against is not that good. I think coaches get into a bad habit when they start watching film, and it's like, hey, this team's not going to be that good that we're playing. You start feeding these kids, and you start feeding their mind about the competition because of their talent. And I think the one thing that these kids don't do is they don't keep evolving their talent. They don't understand that when they get to college, that same talent that they have where they're at, somebody else has it at another school. And sometimes that talent's even better. They just haven't played it, or they haven't seen it. And so they have to continue to keep evolving that talent. I think those are the two things that these kids run into is too much confidence, and they don't evolve their talent.
Thoughts on a receiver stance. I think lately, and the coach put that in there lately, right? You've been seeing the criticisms about like guys crossing their hands over their thighs and just things like that. So what's your thought on a receiver stance?
Yeah, my first initial thought about the entire receiver stance is I think it's overcoached. I really, really do. I think there's some basics that you can keep, that your fundamentals of staying down low and not exposing your chest and coming out of your stance and all that good stuff from an explosive standpoint. I think there's a way to be balanced in your stance, but I think everybody starts talking too much, and this is just right, wrong, or indifferent. I think everybody starts talking about way too many things about the stance when we make it more complicated than what it really is. The hands, where the hands are at, the hands are on the thigh, all those things that I really would say that we all kind of know what the typical old school stance is, But so if it's doesn't look like the old school stance, then I think we all have something to say about it, because it's just not what we're used to. And so I think it's overcoached. I think it's obviously important. It's the first part of becoming a really, really good wide receiver and explosive off the line of scrimmage. But I do think that it is overcoached at times in regards to your feet should be here. You should be bent at this kind of an angle. You should tighten your split up versus a press corner, or your hand should be up in a fighting position. You should be it's just, see what I'm saying? There's just so many things. It's like, man, I just learned the entire play, and now I got to go run the route, and I got to figure out the defense, and I got to figure out how I'm going to get open. But yet I'm sitting here trying to figure out, am I at 60-40, or am I at 80-20, or am I, there's all those little things that go with it. I think when you talk about the stance, I really believe, are you balanced? Are you powerful? And are you explosive off the ball? And so, everybody goes back to all the limited, how do you eliminate some of all the false movement and all those kind of things, but which are good, taking false steps and all that. So I just think you go back and you start watching film, and you just keep going back on film and keep looking at the guys like, okay, are you balanced? Are you powerful? Are you explosive? Is there any wasted movement? Okay, why? All right, let's move on. And so, because like I said, there's a lot of other things that go along with being successful, but it's important. But I do feel that we spend a lot of time on it in regards to obviously overcoaching it a little bit too much. You want the guys to play fast, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I don't want them thinking too much.
Is there a number of releases you want a wide receiver to have?
Man, we just talked about this the other day. It's funny because in the video that we were making the other day, I had got a lot of DMs and text messages of guys that were like, all right, coach, like, what's your top 10 releases? I'm like, if I just sat there and taught one guy 10 releases, like, how would he know which one to use? And so I will tell you this, there's a lot of releases out there. I do believe that there's certain releases that only apply to certain people and their traits. If you're a bigger, like for instance, if you're a big guy compared to a shorter guy is going to use a hit rip rather than a hit over when they go by when they go by the defender on the release. And so it just depends on how big your player is. It depends on the size of your guy, the speed of your guy, the quickness of your guy. But I will tell you one release that I think is phenomenal, and a lot of people I think have talked about this and have heard about it. But that little come to balance release, where you stay down low and you get your feet, you kind of bring your right foot up if your left foot's up, and you bring your back foot up, and you kind of it's called a come to balance release, which allows you to be squared up with the DB, which I think allows you to have a two-way go. You can still use your 1-2 or your 1-2-3 off of that, but I do think it's important when you play wide out, without going into too much detail without the film. But I think it's really important to square the defender up and to make the defender, very uncomfortable. And a great way to do that is to be able to come to balance with your feet and be able to set him up and then become explosive off of that.
Do you have an install teaching progression?
Yeah, I do. I think it's really important to have a progression. I think it's really important from a teaching standpoint that when you go back from an install, you can talk to it in phases. Like, okay, all right, what was the huddle like? What were you thinking on the way to to line up? What's your split? What's your alignment, right? Those are the first couple of things getting out of the huddle. The progression of, after you hear this install of, okay, here's where your splits are. Now, here's what your assignment is. Okay. What are the details of your assignment, right? So what does that mean? Well, that means what happens to your route when it's pressed? What happens to your route if it's cover 2? What happens to your route if the corner's off? What happens to your route if the corner's pressed outside or pressed inside or he's soft bailing? So there's a lot of details before you even get started in regards to your alignment and then your assignment, and then what are the details of your route. The second thing after that, the fourth thing kind of, when we go back and talk about is, okay, all right, now that you're in you kind of understand the details. All right, how was your stem? How was your body language? What was the transition like? What angles are you attacking? In regard, I'm talking about the whole stem now. So after you talk about your details, now it's about the whole stem. How are you setting that defensive back up? what's the timing of the quarterback? So why are you short or long on your stem? So, there's a huge progression of an install in regards to what we do. And you talk about the finish of it too, how you catch the ball, or your thumbs together, or your pinkies together, all those different things. And so there is a huge progression that you teach. I believe in the progression so that when you do go back, you can talk about each phase. Man, you were really good here in your start. You were really good here in the stem. You were good in the transition, but we didn't turn our hands over. You know what I'm saying? In the finish. And so there is a progression. When we teach the install, that's exactly how we teach I teach the install, so that we're trying to figure out the progression of getting there, so that when the kids show up and the kid goes in the game, he's proactive. I talk to my kids all the time about, let's be proactive and not reactive. It's just like your release. When you watch film during the week about the corner that you're going to play, that corner is going to have a different press or different press technique than the guys you played previously. So what hand does he use? How are you going to get off that one hand? How are we going to set him up when we release on a certain route? And then you go back through and you're sitting there thinking, okay, I'm going to be reactive, already knowing what hand. So we want to be reactive instead of him jamming us and then us we want to be proactive instead of reactive. And so the same way when we go line up as an install, I want to make sure my guys that when they react, they're reactive because they were already proactive. And so it's something that we talk about a lot in regards to that install. And I think I think you have to take time and be thorough in your installs. You have to be. I just don't think every little detail is so important, because if it does come up, you've already covered it. And I think the best thing too, to your point, Justin, I think the best way to have that install also is not just getting up on that board and writing and talking. I think it's like you have to be in a classroom where the best way is to make sure your guys are involved in that install, and you're asking them questions of why, of how, or what are you doing, or what are we doing, or just you got to get them involved so that they're also speaking as well. So they're kind of installing the play, themselves.
For sure. Here's a question. What are your everyday drills, and how do you structure your indie periods with the drills and routes and tempo and all that?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've also this is something that I brought up in our talks here over the last couple of weeks in regards to drills. What are some drills? But the biggest part, what do people do pre-practice, post-practice? What kind of tempo? So, great question. I would tell you first, I have different seasons of drills. We have an off season where a lot of my drills pertain to the conditioning part. Obviously, we all have all different types of cone drills. And so I'm really big in the band drill and the cone drill, working on. Now listen to me, Justin, this is just something that I believed as a player. Like, I really never wanted to do a drill that I wasn't going to do in a game. So like, why would I want to do some weird drill that you make up or that you've seen somebody else do, when I'll never do that movement in a game. And so a lot of my drills they all are game related. You always finish a drill with the ball, because in a game you always will finish a drill obviously with the ball. And so I think that's important, but it goes by the season. So the off season, man, we get at it. I mean, we're talking about being able to run your stems, getting out of your stance and start with resistant bands, being able to stay level on your stem with resistant bands, working with bands and cones, getting in and out of what I call your transition, being able to transition in and out of the phase of playing wide out. And so that conditioning phase is kind of in that off-season program. When we get to training camp, again, we're not in season. It's kind of a mixture of off-season and in-season. I still want our guys are still trying to condition, obviously, for the season. And so we have some individual drill where we'll get loosened up. We'll get the hips loosened up. We'll do some drills where our guys will go through the cones. It might not be full speed. It might just be a little bit of some half speed, just kind of getting there, getting loosened up. And then it evolves into a bigger drill where now we're rolling. I love the racing. I've seen a lot of people doing this, but like when you do racing in and out of, or you mirror drills and the guys are racing in the drills, I think it's a great way to teach off of that in regards to their body language. Obviously filming your drills are important, but we'll get into more of that. We'll take the resistant bands off because that part of it's kind of over. And now it becomes more of the racing. It'll become more of the drills that are, kind of maybe there's a route going in that day or something specific that we're doing that day that we've installed. So now we're going to work on that. And so there's a kind of a combination of both of them. When we get into this season, our individual drills, now we go at it, but we spend a lot more time of the fundamental work of working on really small area game specific stuff. The 9 cone stuff is really kind of over. We work more on comeback drills in regards to scramble drill comebacks. We work on sideline drills a lot. Again, just getting those tough catches that we normally don't, because obviously when the practice is over. But we work on a lot of drills in regards to those short areas of maybe it's old over the shoulder type catches. Not a lot of conditioning in this one because obviously we're limited in numbers. We only have like 6 guys. It's not like we have 20 guys out there that can just rock and roll and you have a nice little break. And so we're limited in numbers. So we really do focus on just trying to hit the little things that we might be getting that day or something that we need to work on and get better at that's going to happen in a game.
The wide receiver position in football often attracts the diva type player. What are some things that you do to get them out of that diva mentality?
I don't. I think that's the best. I mean, I think that's one of their best qualities. Now, there has to be an understanding that you better be daggone stinking good too. You better come to work every single day. You got to come to work. Come to work and you put into work, and that's not hard. You can watch it on film how guys work and how they progress. You can watch. You can go through practice and guys that are trying to get better. You can see all that. The diva, the confidence. People call it the arrogance. I call it the silent arrogance. I think there's a lot of people that think people are very arrogant, but yet they're just so focused on their job that they don't have a lot of time to spend and talk to other people. I love it. And I think that's one reason why I love that position because, those guys, they want the football. And why would you not? I mean, divas want the football. They want the attention. And so, it's like a player in the end of a basketball game. Like, you got 5 guys in the huddle and you got 5 of them that don't want the ball. Like, who's taking the last shot to win the game? So, I think it's really, really important to have that trait. Rather, some guys use it, boastfully. Some guys talk about it all the time. Some guys are just quiet about it, but you just know. So I think it's really important for that kind of trait to be involved in these guys. I think, and it's who we are. But I think it's really important for that. And so, but I think there's a way to handle that. If that would answer your question a little bit better. I think the way you handle that is, again, you have that trust and that respect that when that guy goes to work, there's a great communication between you and him in regards to how he needs to get things done or what he's not doing right or what he's doing wrong. And I think that when that player comes over to you and says, yeah, I know that's my fault, then you know what I'm saying? Like, you have the best of both worlds. And so, yeah, go out there and play with a lot of confidence. I know you want the football, but also we all know that this is what's best for the football team. And so that's kind of one of the ways that I kind of handle that, and to kind of, I love it. I think it's awesome. Like, I wouldn't want anything different. It obviously makes your room a lot of fun when you're sitting there in meetings and everybody's, either making fun of each other or having fun, or they're really, what they're doing is they're all so confident that they're holding each other accountable. And so I think it's a great thing to have that confidence. They can't be overconfident and being delusional. We've all seen that now. We've all have guys like that. That's where you just need to bring the player in your office and say, listen, I mean, it's time to just see reality. You're not, let's pull you back a little bit. But there's also that correct diva, if I should say, guys they do it the right way. It's because of their confidence, but they also go to work every single day. And I think the more and more that you continue to build them as a man, the more and more you're going to help them out. But I would never want to take that trait away.
Uh, you just touched on it and basically answered it, but the coach was asking, as far as, you know, with a kid's ego, when they think they're better than they are, how do you go about, you know, talking to them and without belittling them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, first of all, what you just said is the best. I don't think that there's a couple words that I want to make sure that my kids never, that they understand. Like, listen, I'll never disrespect you, and I'll never downgrade you. All right, and I'll never demoralize you. Those are three things that I believe in. That listen, if you understand that I'm never going to downgrade you, demoralize you, or I don't downgrade you, demoralize you, or like basically destroy you. Like, I'm not going to talk bad about you. And so, or I'm not going to try to hurt you. I'm not going to try to one up you, but I'm going to be absolutely upfront and honest with you in what I believe in. And it's to help you become a better player. And listen, you're not as good as you think you are yet. Do you have that potential? Yes. But are you allowing yourself to get there because of what you're doing now? No. And so I think there's a great line of communication that you have to have with every one of these players. And a lot of it is go back and watch references. Now, listen, this is huge to me. And I've seen this over the last couple of weeks now, that what we're doing right now, you know, we're home. And so you get to see a lot of these people out there putting all these videos up there, right? Well, everybody out there showing all these drills that they're doing, how great they are in and out of their breaks, how great they're doing this, how great they're doing that, how great they're going to be, how great, you know what I'm saying? There's like so many people out there right now that are putting all this stuff out there. And then you turn on their film and you're like, hold on, time out. Like, where's the player? Like where are you as the player? And so film to me is way more important than anything. And I think it's a great resource to go back. And, you know, you got a kid that talks about how great he is. When you pull him in your office and say, listen, all right, explain to me how I'm going to put you in the game when right here you get pressed 3 out of 10 snaps, but the 3 times you get pressed, you don't even get off the line of scrimmage. It's easy to run routes on air. When there's not a corner that's playing that's not impressed, to me, that's just routes on air anyway. Like, it doesn't matter. They can't – it's routes on air. So don't sit here and tell me how great you are and what you can do and what you should be doing when you're not putting it on film. Like, what you say to me means absolutely nothing. You have got to prove it, and that's the best thing about film. I always learned this from John Cooper when I was at Ohio State. Film does not lie. Like, if you want to become great, put it on film. If you want to be in the NFL or you want to be in college, then you should be dominating, not just being good at what you do, not catching like 2 or 3 balls a game because you're playing against bad talent. I'm talking about dominating every single play that you're in. Like, your film does not lie. Great examples right now. We don't have the chance to go see players, you know, doing what they're doing because we can't travel. So film. Like, what are you putting on film? The player you are today, is the attitude you are, the toughness that you are, that's going to be the same player tomorrow. And so I think it's really, really important that you establish that communication up front and be honest with all those guys. Listen, I'm not going to demoralize you. I'm not going to downgrade you. You know, I'm not going to tear you down. I'm not going to destroy you. I love you, and I have a lot of respect for you. But my job is to turn you into a player, and the best way to do that is to be honest with you. If you agree or disagree, listen, there's going to be some kids that don't like you because you're so honest. Good. But I told somebody this morning, I think I texted out this morning, that, listen, when it's all said and done, when that kid becomes a really good player down the road, he's going to love you. And he's going to love you because he finally got honesty for the first time in his career. And I think that's really, really important. I think that's how you handle not just the kids that are delusional, but you got to handle every single kid like that is in your room. And you got to be able to have those traits of your expectations, what you expect of him, what are your standards, and that open line of communication to say, man, are you really hitting those things? And if you're not, we got to get better. If you are, listen, you're doing really, really good, but I'm not impressed yet. Like, let's keep going, you know, and just keep growing. So it's something that I think I'm passionate about. I think it's fun, but everybody's right. Like, there are so many people that are so delusional.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you this, just something that's also come up, and I don't know if other coaches have experiences too, but the other thing that's really crazy about this profession that we're in regards to all these kids, and I don't know if you've seen this or not, Justin, but there are a lot of kids that are delusional. It's amazing how many kids that are in our room that are not delusional, they feel like they're really, really good. They talk about how great they are, but how insecure they are.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
It's unbelievable.
Yep.
You're sitting
Absolutely.
here thinking like, man, like you just were like player of the year in high school. And you're sitting in my room talking about you're just not there because you just don't feel like you can do it, or just maybe your talent has taken you so far in high school, but yet you're not really sure if you can match it now. It's unbelievable. And I think that you have to attack that as well. It's harder to build those guys up than it is to bring, the delusional kids down. And so I think that's something that's really, really important for all you young coaches and coaches that go through this profession, that there's three types of kids. There's kids that believe in, well, there's really four types of kids. There's kids that know they're not that good. There's kids that know that they are really good and they do it and they work on it. They're called professionals. And then there's kids that are insecure about their abilities and that are really good. And then there's kids that are maybe not as good, but are very delusional. And so I think it's really important that, I think we've talked about this a week ago, going into your room and individualizing each one of those guys and trying to figure out who they are. And then listen, and I'm really big on this. You don't build those relationships in front of everybody. Like if Justin, if you're one of my wideouts, and again, I'm right, wrong, or indifferent. This is just my belief and philosophy. But if I'm trying to help you out, I got to know if you can be constructed in front of other people. Like I got to know that you can handle criticism in front of other people, or I got to know that, do I need to pull you to the side and say, listen, hey, we both know, right? All right. So now there's a comfort level for you to have that open communication with me. There's a lot of guys that can't take criticism, rather it's because it's the way they were raised or just who they are as a person. Like, it's reality. And so you got to be able to understand, and you got to be able to know how to treat each one of those guys and to build their weaknesses. And again, it goes back to having that trust and respect. And so I think there's a lot of ways, but hopefully that answered your question about those kids that are delusional. It's tough.
Yeah.
Like, it really, really is tough. And not to keep going, but the biggest thing about all that is, and I think we all would agree this, but a lot of that delusional mentality comes from their parents. Like, their parents are delusional as well, because their parents think that this young man, caught 3 touchdowns in high school and won the game for their high school. So now all of a sudden they should be starting as a freshman at a Division I, a top 10 powerhouse in college. Like, that's not how it works. Like, listen, you don't understand. He's a freshman all over again. So what did he do a freshman in high school? So the parents, again, you got to go back and you got to understand the resources of why they feel like that, why they're insecure, why they're delusional. And you might have to call the parent and say, listen, I need you to come in, man. You need to watch film, and you got to get those guys to understand, so that all those resources that's feeding these kids can kind of break them down a little bit. And then you start building them back up. And I'm telling you, man, those are the kids you talk to for the rest of your life,
True.
So it's awesome.
Here's one from a coach.
I didn't mean to take too much time.
No, you're good. You're good, coach. That's what needed to be said. What methods do you use to coach the athletes to continue to evolve their talent? Coach said their talented players lack work ethic at times because they have been the best players since they were 5 years old, and do not take the advice from coaches who had played at the college level.
Yeah, I tell you, it's a failure is the best way to be humbled. It really is. And unfortunately, a lot of kids don't see that failure when they're young, because their talent surpasses so much of their the competition that they play against. A little bit easier at our level, because when they get here, it's kind of like, yeah, you're playing against some of the best guys in the world. You're playing against true pros. But I think you just have to go back, and I think one of the biggest ways is taking the film and you really, really study the deficiencies of your player. And I think as you go back and you guys watch film and you go watch film with your player, you can go back and go through all those characteristics and traits of becoming a great wideout. And you can see on film, is he becoming a great player? When you're in high school, for example, if I was in high school, I would be able to – I would want, as a coach, I would want to be able to study some of the greatest players that ever played. and be able to go now watch film of a guy that's really talented, that's dominating at the high school level, and then go watch film with him and say, okay, listen, here's what you did, right? And you got away with, but here's what one of the best players in the world, one of the best that have ever played the game, did. Here's how he ran his routes. Here's what his effort was like. Here's what he did on a day in and day out basis. Are you doing that? So I always think that you can always get better by learning from people that are already better than you, if that makes sense. I don't think you can you want to keep watching talent and comparing yourself to talent that's not as good, or I just think that there's always somebody better doing what you're doing. And I think there's a great way to learn. A great question to all these college kids or the high school kids is, listen, who do you think you emulate your game after? Like, who do you watch and who do you study? Well, if a kid says, listen, I don't really watch anybody, well, you're not learning. Like, your game will never develop, I remember growing up. I mean, listen, I wasn't one of the most talented players either, but I remember growing up, watching. I used to love watching Jerry Rice. Now, listen, I wasn't as talented as Jerry Rice, but I knew one thing for sure that I could do that was going to help me was I was going to try to outwork Jerry Rice. Like, I wanted to outwork every single person. That's one thing that I took from him. And so I think that when you go back and you look at all those things, it's great to say, and you can do it as a coach too. I think when you look as a coach, you're going to be able to look at a player and say, hey, he kind of reminds me of such and such. He's going to remind me of a Chad Johnson. This kid's going to remind me of a Terrell Owens. This kid reminds me of like a Donald Driver or somebody that you've studied, that you've watched. And then I think it's important for that kid to see, like, what he does and what the difference is, because that's where he's trying to get to. Does that make sense? And so I just think that's important.
How do you feel about coaches changing with the generation? Do you feel coaches should adapt to the times or coach how they did 10, 15 years ago? So the question is really for older coaches. But.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I think, there's a couple of things that I think that are really, really tough to teach. I think it's really, really hard. I think it's really, really hard to teach confidence. I really do. I really think it's hard to teach confidence. I really think it's hard to teach toughness. I can't turn everybody into a Mike Tyson, so I think those are two things that are really, really tough to do and that are challenging to do as a coach. I think both of those are the decision of the athlete. And it's something inside of them that they have to overcome. To your question though, I would say no. I would say that the old school football is there's standards in there. Listen, the old school football was to do two things: impact men and change people's lives. Like, that's old school football. I just read a book the other day about two coaches that have coached for 50 years combined. They've coached over a century of football. And the two main things that they've had in there since the 60s when they started coaching was to impact players and to change their lives. Like, that's old school football. There was a care factor in all those coaches. Those coaches made no money coaching football. Like, they would make I think they would get like $100 to go get scholarships to go play football somewhere. Like, that old school philosophy, that love for the game, no. Now, is there some things that you can adapt to the new generation? Yes, I believe 100%. I think the social media that we have today, all the fans that these players are surrounded by since they're in high school, that it's a different world. And so the old school football of still trying to impact these kids and love on these kids, being tough with them, tough love, no. I think it's awesome. That's something that I love to do. It's something that I will never change. Again, I could be right, wrong, or indifferent, but you also have to have an understanding of all these people that are surrounding this athlete and getting these athletes to understand that how great they are. Does that make sense? That wasn't like it back in the day. Back in the day, in the old school, they all worked on farms. They grew up, they baled hay, right? They came home, they milked cows in the morning at 5 a.m. They'd milk cows at 6 o'clock at night. Like, that was their job. They baled hay in between, and then they went to school. Like, they knew how to work. And so nowadays, everybody just knows how great they are. And so I think there's ways to adapt to both of them, but I would never change that old school mentality of that love and trying to make that impact.
Coach here, first of all, he wants to say hello from Gaffney and thank you for all that you did there. What's your biggest lesson you've learned from coaching?
The biggest lesson that I've learned from coaching is no matter what you do, no matter how many times the young man fails you, no matter how many times the young man, might disrespect you at times, might not agree with what you believe in, might not have, might not have been able to make that choice that you've harped on over and over and over. There's always a road. There's always a time down the line. And it could be after, post their career, when that young man comes back and you've made an impact in their life and they're a better man and a better husband and a better father for what you've done and what you taught them. Tough love going through school is good. And I've learned that you're not going to be able to save every kid. It's the most unfortunate thing that you have in the profession that we're in. I learned this from the very beginning, that you're going to try to save 100 kids and you'd be lucky to change one. And still though, every year you just got to keep trying to do everything you can to change that 100, those 100 kids. You have the biggest impact on the future of these kids' lives that they might not know it then, but they'll eventually know it down the road. And then it will help you to establish that relationship. There's nothing better that I have today than communicating with guys that I've coached 15, 17, 17 years ago. At some point in time, rather it was like training them while I was playing or when I became a coach afterwards. And so that's the biggest thing that I've ever learned. And to this day, no matter who's in that room, no matter who is in that room or on that football team, always do the little things, no matter what. Even if they burned you 10 times, I'm going to do it the 11th time, the 12th. It just doesn't matter. And until it's all said and done, and knowing that you gave it everything you have.
That's such a strong point. And that was something that I struggle with, is just the fact that you can't save everybody. Unfortunately, you can't. So,
and you can't. But knowing that though, you have to eliminate the mindset.
Yeah.
You eliminate the mindset. You dig in these kids' lives. You call them. You travel to their houses. You go sit in their dorms. I think that was one of the best things that I've learned. First and foremost, being at a small school, I was so fortunate when I was at Kentucky Christian, because you really had to do like everything. And so, after practice, you'd go to the dorms and check in on them in their dorm rooms. You sit in their dorm rooms. It's just there's so much there that you just keep trying. And I tell you what, man, when these kids become, great men down the road and mentors to other people, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's what it's about for sure. Position question here. What's your main coaching points for catching a back shoulder throw?
Yeah, obviously, the biggest thing is, first of all, when you talk about a back shoulder throw, I think the first thing you can do is you never can expect it. You always need to anticipate it, but you never can expect it. And so, a lot of guys trying to use that back shoulder, and all of a sudden the ball's thrown out in front of them. So I think you run your route to win first, and making sure that you're running your tail off to win on those go balls. And then, obviously, you adjust because of where that defensive back is at mentally. You now adjust to where that ball is at. And I think the first thing that you have to do is slow your body down. You have to slow the catch down. And so I think, that might be a tip that's not used much, but for some reason, I just always felt that as I get ready to go jump up and I know I'm getting ready to turn, as I turn, I want to make sure that I stop my entire body and slow my entire body down, so that now that my hand-eye coordination can work, in unison to track that ball. It also allows me, because a lot of back shoulder throws are near the sideline, it also allows me to understand where I'm at, that I'm not moving all over the place trying to catch a back shoulder. So I have a really good understanding of where my body is at, because I know that I've stopped it and I know that I've slowed it down. So now I can understand, am I going to have to fall when I catch this ball to keep my feet in bounds? Or am I going to be able to just keep my feet in bounds because I've established myself enough and slowed myself enough down? The next thing is just framing that catch. It's a tough catch, but you got to understand that when you get a back shoulder catch, the reason why you're getting the back shoulder is because the back shoulder to me means that you're not hitting that home run out in front of you. So you got to make sure that when you hit that back shoulder catch, that now you just got to guarantee the catch. A lot of guys just try to get that back shoulder catch and then do something. You're not going to do a lot of stuff with the back shoulder catch. And so slowing yourself down, framing the ball, making sure that you're guaranteeing that catch, rather it's a high catch where you get your thumbs together or a low catch with your pinkies together. But you got to stop everything and to make that catch. You can't let your body go all over the place.
Here we go. Coach Ford dropped some stats on you. He said, turn the program around when you went from 0-11 in 2010 to 7-4 in a national top 25 ranking in 2012. What are the top 2 ways you turned this program around so quickly?
Passion. That is it. Passion. So, I mean, I don't know how you can go on any of that. I just think my guys, you know, the staff that we had, our staff that we built was all about those kids. And, you know, obviously when we got to the school, I think they had won 1 or 2 games, maybe over a 4 or 5 year period. And don't tell them, they're not supposed to know. One was a forfeit. So we always counted it as either none or one. But, you know, we went in there and it was probably, again, when I got to Kentucky Christian University, it was one of the greatest experiences because I took over a program that had 20-some guys left on the team, and we brought in over 180 kids our first year. And you want to talk about the difference in diversity in regards to upperclassmen and freshmen. You know, every one of those upperclassmen thought that they were being replaced. All the young kids came in, they thought they were going to be in the NFL because of a lot of where my coaches were from, you know. None of it existed. And so basically those guys, they needed to understand immediately how we were going to do stuff. And our goal was not to win. Our goal was to make sure that we were the toughest son of the guns that came off that football field. We played football the right way, and that when we walked off that field, we were going to be more respected than anybody that they played. And it was by the way that we hit people, by the way that we ran, how fast we played, how efficient that we played. And so there was just a lot of things. And so we practiced that, you know, we practiced it. And everything that we did, it was about gaining that respect. And so the weight room, I mean, our guys became animals in the weight room. They knew and they understood that they could become better players in the weight room. And so there was just a lot of things in regards to that. But the kids, I think the kids really responded because they understood that there was so much passion. These kids were being so loved on. There was so much relationship, so many relationships being built that those kids believed in us. And again, when they start believing in you and they start trusting in you, now there's that respect there. And I just believe that that's where you can go to games and you're just like, listen, hey, whatever happens, happens. But, man, we're about to go find out, you know. And so and it worked out like that. And we were very, very fortunate to turn it around to 7-4, top 25 in the second year, with really, really all those guys being under sophomores and with a few upperclassmen. So year 3 would have been pretty neat. It would have been really, really neat to find out what happened. But we ended up going to Marshall. So, but that passion, man, I'm telling you, there's something about it. And it's not fake passion, too. I think a lot of coaches, you know, kids aren't dumb, right? I mean, they're smart. Like, they know when you're fake. And so you just got to be going in there with all that passion. And those kids got to believe you. And they did. And we flipped it around.
Oh, absolutely. In position meetings with limited time, how much do you coach fundamentals on film as opposed to making sure they are doing assignments correctly or installing plays for the week?
Yeah, I think when you go back, again, the question that you asked earlier about the whole Instar thing, I think you have to – this is – we talked about the releases or that stance, about all the things that you do in a stance. Like, the limited time that you have to teach is why you have to keep things simple. And the simplicity, you just have a couple major points for each thing I believe in. And so that when you go back, you can just talk about those 4 or 5 things of why you weren't successful. And then you can move on. But I think to your point, we all run out of time. Like we all can sit there and we all run out of time. But when we're sitting there with the limited time that we have, to be able to go through film and say, okay, why weren't you successful? Okay, it was your stem. All right, we got to fix the stem, right? What are you supposed to do? Bam, next play, So there's all those little things that you can do in regards to just having your little points. That what we call them 3 things. I call it the alignment, assignment, and details. Like where'd you fail at? All right, and where do we need to get better at? And this is why you weren't successful. Oh, you didn't know your alignment. Okay. Oh, you didn't know your assignment, right? So obviously you didn't know what you had, or you didn't know the details off of it. You didn't know your stems. So it's just, you break down those things in simplicity. And so you can talk about it and communicate about it. You can do it in practice because it's real short, and you move on.
I know that this question is actually one of the ones that you had posted about the other week, how you utilize your pre-practice time. So it was just asked, how do you guys do that? Utilize your pre-practice time?
Yeah, we do a line drill, really just kind of getting the guys loosened up. It's the first time they've really done any type of running or anything, just post stretch. So we obviously, again, we're talking about in season. So it's a whole different world, especially the longevity of our season. So we're really trying to just hone in on getting loosened up. Like I talked about a little bit earlier, the sideline drill. We do a scramble comeback drill. Some things that where I'm getting involved with these guys, kind of trying to push them around a little bit. We'll get into some blocking drills where, again, I'm the one holding the bag, so I can kind of, pepper them up a little bit. And so they know that it's not going to be just, somebody they're going to just, not be able to go hard against. And so we get at it a little bit in that, and it kind of evolves as we go. Like, for instance, we'll do the, get all the types of catches just to get loosened up, and then evolve into the comeback or the scramble drill or the sideline drill where now we're going full speed. So, but again, we're minimizing that space, just kind of getting the fast twitch stuff going. So we kind of hit all that.
How do you deal with an extremely talented player coming off multiple injuries that mentally just can't get right?
Wow, what a great question. I was real fortunate, obviously, last year, Allen Robinson obviously coming off an ACL out of Jacksonville, and I didn't have to put up with too much of he was on a mission. When you talk about multiple injuries, I think that's a slow process of healing. I think you just got to build that relationship up with him. You got to find out what's best for him. I think you need to find out smaller goals for the player, being able to attack those smaller goals. I think now you're really talking about building one man's confidence really back up. Probably easier when you're talking about a young man who's coming off one injury and then getting back into it, but probably a little bit different when you're talking about somebody that's had multiple. I've never really been in that situation, but just off the top of my head, I would just think that you would have to, it'd be a slower process in regards to the healing of it, putting out their small goals. I'm never losing sight. If the young man wants to do it, then you're all in. I think I'm just sitting here thinking off the top of my head, there's probably something in there that would tell me that that the young man wants to do it, but he's kind of scared to do it. So I think there's a way to handle that also in regards to getting him back with confidence. And then maybe there's just there's something in there that he doesn't want to do it anymore. And I think those are all different phases that you have to deal with in his injury. But the biggest thing, obviously, small points, things to just kind of, attack, and goals, and start making your way back until he, has that confidence.
Absolutely. Here's a good question. What's one thing you'd go back and tell your younger self as a coach?
You know what, man, it's yeah, I think I think this is a great point that I think a lot of us get caught up in, and it's natural. And it came up earlier with the young man it's coaching Division III football, that I think we all seek that higher level of football. I think that we all try to get to that Division I, that Power 5 school. I think a lot of us do, maybe not some of us, or even, having those goals and dreams of coaching in the NFL. My mindset changed early. I think when I first came out of retirement, like that's what I wanted to do immediately. Like I wanted to go Division I right away. I wanted to get back in the league and coach. And so When that doesn't happen, you're kind of like, man, and then all of a sudden Kentucky Christian calls and offers me the head job at NAIA school. And my idea was, well, let me go down there for, 1 year or whatnot and coach. And then all of a sudden I'm going to go to a Power 5 school and go to the NFL and coach. And I think the one thing that I would tell myself that I learned quickly, and I actually learned this while I was at Kentucky Christian, like, man, it didn't matter where you were at. Like, that's your platform, you're coaching football. And so just be where your feet are at. I'm a huge believer now that there's not a job that I've ever gotten that I've called for, if that makes sense. And there's a lot of calls that I've made to get jobs, and tons of calls that I've made to get jobs. And I didn't get one of them. All those jobs have kind of found me. And I think the one thing that I did learn, that I would have told myself in the beginning is, man, do everything you can where you're at, where your feet are at, and let the good Lord take care of the rest. And so until you do that, like, you're never going anywhere. Like, you haven't learned the value of what you're going to become as a coach. And so it's all about the progression of who you will become as a coach, not what you can do as a coach. And so I then realized early in my career, which I wish I would have known in the beginning, would have been, hey, listen, your talent, the way you coach people, that will become contagious, and people will know. And then if people want you, they want you. If they don't, you're in a great situation what you're doing right now. And so don't chase that next step. Just chase where you're at right now and become the best coach that you can become. And people will know, people will know. I mean, Walter Payton says it the best here in Chicago. He said, listen, people don't know me because of what I talk about, people know me because of what I did. And that's what I wanted them to know. And so I think that's a really, really important, really important to anybody's success. You'll never be the best coach that you possibly can be where you're at when you're looking down the road, or you have hopes to be down the road. It's good to have goals, but set those goals aside and be the best coach that you can be. Be the best coach that you are, that you can be on your staff.
Absolutely. Coach, I know you had to run at some point. Do you have time for a couple more?
Yeah, there's a couple more and we'll get up out of here. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Coach just said we've all been guilty of having a favorite player. How do you feel about coaches that, show equal treatment for players or lack thereof? Or
yeah, I think what a great question, because the guy that does it right, the professional that does it right, obviously we all like that guy. We wish that all the guys were like that guy. But I think it goes back to something that we talked about earlier, about when you walk in that room, making sure that you individualize each one of them, and that you build a great relationship inside of them, of just that communication. And then you start working on their deficiencies and your weaknesses. I'll tell you the one thing that I can't stand. I never could stand this as a player. Now, they're all, obviously I was very fortunate to play with some really good players, but I just never was a guy where even when you have a Torrey Holt or an Isaac Bruce, I don't know if you're too young to know those two guys or not, but
I know
when you're in a room with Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt, and then the coach looks at you and says, hey, why don't you be like them? Like, why don't you do what they do? Well, I'm not them. Like, I'm different than them. My upbringing was different than them. The way I got here is different than them. And so I think it's important to, yes, you're going to have guys in the room that you have earned more respect for, but that doesn't mean you treat them any differently. And so there's different ways that you treat them, because they're all different, but you don't treat them differently. You don't treat them all the same, is what I guess my point in regards to that. Even though you have guys that do it the right way, you got to teach guys how to do it the right way by what's the best way for them to accomplish that. And it's not by pointing out and saying, hey, why don't you do it like Isaac does? Or why don't you do it like Calvin Johnson does? I'm not 6'6", you know what I'm saying? So, but it was always, there was always something that was important to me, to know that treat them all individuals, treat them all different in regards to that, but also hold them all the same to the accountability of what you believe in and what your morals are. And I think you just start believing in those relationships. And it's awesome now, because I communicate with my guys just about the same but like I said, they're all different. They have their insecurities. They have their, it's all different. And I think that's just kind of how you keep building the trust in those players.
Absolutely. Coach, we'll end on this last one right here. What methods do you use to hire good assistants? And what are some of the key questions you ask or qualities you look for?
Say that one more time. I missed you for a second.
What methods do you use to hire good assistants? And what are some of the key questions you ask or qualities you look for?
Yeah, what a great man! What a great question. This is a hard one because I guess I should say I wasn't always right. Obviously we're all going to find out the hard way. And obviously hopefully less than we will in the good. But I guess the first things that I looked for when hiring coaches was who they are as a person. That was the first thing that I really looked for, making sure that they were humble, making sure that they were passionate about kids, making sure that they were unselfish, making sure that they were good teachers. Now listen, not coaches, but teachers. Like, can they teach? Is it always about them, or is it about the players? Can they teach how, can they just teach players? And so I think that was really, really important. I think a great way communication. Can they communicate? Are they good when they respond to a lot of your questions in regards to, just being passionate? I think that passion. And then I think one of the biggest things that, in regards to when you talk to these coaches is loyalty. You always are upfront with coaches saying, listen, I'll do everything I can to help you. I want to know, what do you want to become? What's your goals? I would love to have coaches that want to become head football coaches, because I think they have the mindset then, obviously, that they have the understanding of what they want to become, but are they willing to help your program build their career, if that makes sense? And so I think that's really, really big. I was always taught a long time ago that the job as the assistant is to help the head football coach and his program become very, very successful. And in return, his career will become the same. And so being able to find those out during that interview process is really, really important. Anybody that comes in and talks about, I did this, I did that, I've done this, I've done that, like the I word, and it's just, I don't understand that, and it's about the team, it's about the program, it's about what can be best for that team to succeed. Unfortunately, as a lot of coaches have realized, there's a rarity of those guys out there. A lot of coaches want to hire coaches that they know, because of they feel like there's a little bit more of a loyalty to them. I would challenge a lot of coaches to kind of find new and young up and coming coaches also that maybe are that are hungry, that are eager, as well as older coaches that have been established and understand it. There's a nice little blend of coaches there. I think that was something that was unique that we've done as our staffs grew at Kentucky Christian and at Limestone. There was some guys that have coached for 1 or 2 years that played in the NFL or didn't play in the NFL. And then there was coaches that have been around for 50, 60 years that they love coaching football, which goes back to that similarity of having old school and adapted to new school. And so I think guys playing, that experience of playing is a good deal. I think it's a benefit if they've played it, but then also know how to coach it. Because obviously there's a lot of guys that played it that have no idea about how to coach it, because it's what I done. Like, they're not you, right? And so I would just challenge you to go back when you go through hiring those coaches, that the first and foremost thing is you find a real guy, like someone that you can trust, somebody that's there for your program and not themselves, and somebody that can help you guys win.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, I know you got to get rolling, but I can't thank you enough for jumping on with us this morning, man, and dropping a ton of knowledge on us for all these coaches in here. And there was plenty in here that had a chance to be able to listen to you. And, obviously people are writing into the chat, just, thanking you for your time and the serious just insight that you were able to just give us with so many things, whether from a technical standpoint with the position or just coaching and building young men. And that's what we're in here for, So once again, Coach, thank you so much for spending time with us this morning.
All right, guys, I appreciate it. Stay blessed too and stay healthy.
Yes, sir. Have a great day, Coach.
You too.